In the Imperium of Man, there is no peace, no compassion, and no mercy. There is only survival maintained by silence, fear, and the steady thunder of bolter fire. Across 1,000,000 worlds, humanity kneels beneath the golden shadow of the Emperor, whispering prayers to a corpse who has not spoken for 10,000 years. And among those who enforce his will, none are more feared, more revered, or more misunderstood than the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines, the Angels of Death. They are worshipped as heroes, as saviors, as divine instruments sent by the God Emperor himself. But beneath that myth, beneath the shining ceramite and the prayers of the faithful, lies another truth, a truth the Imperium dares not speak. Sometimes, the angels hunt humanity itself. It begins not with chaos, nor with Xenos invasion, but with silence. Entire cities vanishing without record, communications cut, astropaths reporting psychic storms before being burned out from within. When Imperial Guard regiments arrive, they find nothing but ash. No enemy corpses, no signs of struggle, only the faint chemical scent of promethium, the blackened remains of churches, and sigils of the Aquila carved into melted steel. The official report always says the same thing: contamination, rebellion, heresy, purged under the Emperor's mercy. But the soldiers whisper of something else. They whisper of black-armored giants descending from the sky. They whisper of space marines who came not to defend, but to erase. The Imperium's scale defies comprehension. 1,000,000 worlds means 1,000,000 governments, countless faiths, ceaseless corruption, and a bureaucracy so vast it devours its own memory. Within that labyrinth, orders are issued that no one dares to question. Sometimes, an entire planet is condemned by mistake. Sometimes, it is condemned on purpose. And sometimes, the ones sent to carry out the extermination are the very symbols of imperial salvation. When the Astartes come, the people rejoice until the guns turn inward. Few understand the political weight behind an inquisitorial seal. When that sigil is pressed upon parchment, it does not merely command obedience, it silences history. A single inquisitor's word can redirect an entire chapter of Space Marines, or erase one from the archives. Most inquisitors are cautious, calculating, but others are fanatics who see threats in every human heart. To them, doubt is heresy, fear is corruption, and knowledge is poison. When such a mind wields power, a world can burn overnight. And when such a decree reaches a chapter master, even an angel must kneel. It is easy to imagine the Space Marines as flawless warriors, the Emperor's perfect weapons, immune to human weakness. But perfection in the Imperium is a lie. The Astartes are human once, and what remains of that humanity festers beneath their armor. They are loyal, yes, but loyalty can be twisted. They obey, but obedience can become sin. They kill, and they learn to justify it as righteousness. When a chapter is ordered to cleanse a human colony to slaughter men, women, and children for the greater purity of the Imperium, they do not weep, they pray. They tell themselves that this is what the Emperor demands. And as bolter shells crack open the skulls of the innocent, the chaplains chant litanies to drown out the scream. On the planet Carthian 4, a rebellion was declared. The official records call it a chaos cult uprising. But those who survived know the truth. There was no rebellion. The local population had simply stopped paying their tithes after decades of famine. They begged for aid, not war. Instead, a single transmission reached the stars. Civil disobedience spreading. Recommend immediate sanction. 2 weeks later, the sky opened. Drop pods rained down like meteors. The heraldry of the angels in carmine gleamed crimson under the firelight. At first, the people cheered. They thought salvation had come. And then the shooting began. No chaos banners were found. No mutants, no daemons, only civilians clutching their children, cut down as they ran for shelter. By dawn, Carthian IV was silent. When the Administratum reclaimed the planet, every record had been rewritten. The report ended with a single phrase: faith restored through flame. But the silence does not last. Among the Astartes themselves, doubt begins to fester. There are whispers in the Reclusium chaplains arguing behind sealed doors, librarians sensing psychic unrest in their brothers. Are we still protecting humanity, one asks, or merely preserving control? Yet even such a question is dangerous. To question an inquisitor's order is to invite death. Some chapters have tried to resist and have been wiped from the records for their disobedience. The 2nd and 11th legions were erased from the annals of the Imperium. The High Lords of Terror never explained why. Perhaps they rebelled. Perhaps they simply refused to kill their own. The truth is sealed behind vaults of silence. When Space Marines hunt humanity, it is not with rage, but with precision. Entire hives are targeted, their air recycled with nerve gas released through the vents. Orbital strikes are disguised as meteor impacts. Civilian transports vanish en route to pilgrimage worlds. The people are told it was warp interference, a navigational accident. But aboard the battle barges, the Tech Marines record the operation as cleansing complete. To the Astartes, this is not murder, it is duty. The Emperor's will is absolute, even when it is written by mortal hand. What the people of the Imperium never understand is that the Astartes do not serve humanity. They serve the concept of the Imperium itself. They protect the system, not the souls within it. Their faith is in the structure of obedience, not compassion. They are bred to sustain order, not justice. When a planetary governor grows too ambitious, when a sector priest begins to question the tithes, when a general of the Astra Militarum gains too much loyalty among his men, the call goes out. A training exercise, a joint inspection, an emergency deployment. And then, one night, silence falls. The next day, a new governor is sworn in. The soldiers speak only in whispers. The banners are cleaned of blood. No one dares to ask what happened. Within the Inquisition, there is a phrase: "The greatest heresy is truth unguarded." That truth is what the Space Marines are sent to bury. The average citizen cannot comprehend how fragile the Imperium truly is. Billions die every day, entire worlds lost to warp storms or famine, and yet the lie of unity must remain intact. If even one sector learned that the angels of death could be turned against them, the faith of the Imperium would shatter overnight. And so, the purges continue quiet, unseen, eternal. But not all chapters obey so easily. The Minotaurs, for instance, are notorious for serving the High Lords directly, not the Adeptus Astartes command. They appear suddenly during internal conflicts, annihilating Imperial Guard regiments, silencing dissenting chapters, erasing witnesses. When questioned, their reply is always the same: the Emperor commands. The Grey Knights act with similar secrecy, though their missions are veiled in the language of demon hunting. Yet even they have purged entire convents of the Sisters of Battle. When those sisters witnessed something they should not have, an act so blasphemous it was erased from every archive. The Inquisition calls it containment. The survivors call it murder in silver armor. And then there are the unknown wars, the silent wars, as some historians dare to call them. Conflicts fought between loyalist chapters under false pretenses, each believing the other to be corrupted. By the time the truth emerges, both are too ashamed to speak of it. In one recorded case, the Celestial Lions were nearly annihilated after investigating an inquisitor's cruelty. The Ordo Hereticus labeled them traitors, and their entire chapter was ambushed during a campaign. Coincidence, the Imperium said. Retribution, others whispered. The message was clear: obedience or extinction. For a Space Marine, disobedience is not merely rebellion, it is identity death. They are bred for purpose, and without it, they collapse. The Astartes, who question orders too deeply, are often reassigned, reconditioned, or redeemed through suicidal missions. Chaplains recite verses to purge their doubt. Apothecaries monitor their gene seed for impurity. And captains ensure that loyalty is enforced not by faith, but by fear of shame. The Imperium needs its angels pure, not thoughtful. Yet beneath this iron obedience, something human remains. There are records hidden, suppressed of chapters that refuse to carry out such purges. The Lamenters, for instance, once turned their guns away from an imperial world under sanction. They refused to slaughter innocents accused of mutation. For their defiance, they were marked as cursed and abandoned to die in isolation. Their plea to the High Lords was never answered. For centuries, they fought alone, surrounded by enemies, their numbers dwindling until they were little more than a rumor. To the Imperium, mercy is treason. Those who do survive such acts of conscience carry their guilt like a relic. There are stories of lone Astartes wandering the stars, stripped of heraldry, their armor unpainted warriors without a chapter, without a name. They no longer fight for the Imperium, but neither do they fight against it. They simply wander, searching for a meaning the galaxy has forgotten. Some call them ghosts, others call them angels who fell too far from heaven to ever return. Even now, across the galaxy, operations continue. On some distant agri-world, an entire farming population is declared heretic for harboring refugees. A single distress call echoes through the void. Hours later, thunder descends. The people look to the sky and see drop pods streaking through the clouds like falling stars. They kneel, they pray, they call out in joy. The Emperor protects until the first bolt shell tears through the crowd. There is no rebellion. There is no chaos. There is only order restored through extermination. And in the aftermath, as the smoke rises and the fields burn, a single Astartes removes his helmet. His eyes are grey, lifeless. He looks at the carnage, then to the heavens above. Somewhere in that endless darkness, a corpse sits upon a golden throne, blind to all of this. The Marine whispers a single phrase under his breath. "Forgive me, Father." Then he walks away, the sound of his boots echoing against the ruin, his faith hollow, his soul buried beneath the weight of obedience. Because in the Imperium of man, salvation and damnation wear the same armor. The angels of death were created to defend humanity, but in defending the Imperium, they have become its executioners. They are the hammer that smashes rebellion, the flame that purges doubt, the silence that erases truth. And as long as the Imperium endures, they will continue to hunt their own, not for hatred, not for power, but for duty. For in a galaxy built on lies, the greatest heresy is to remember what humanity was ever meant to be. There are no coincidences in the Imperium, only orders. And among those orders, some are spoken aloud, while others are sealed in silence, delivered in coded Vox transmissions, or written on sheets of flayed parchment that dissolve once read. These are the hidden orders, the secret decrees whispered from the High Lords of Terror, carried by the Inquisition, and executed by those who have sworn absolute obedience. They are the lifeblood of the Imperium's most terrible machinery, the machinery of silence. To understand the politics behind such orders, one must first understand that the Imperium is not a government. It is an infection. It is a body kept alive through endless amputation, cutting away every part that might threaten the rot within. The ecclesiarchy preaches faith. The administratum enforces debt. The Inquisition ensures ignorance, and binding them all together are the Space Marines, the Emperor's perfect killers, the blade that falls without hesitation. When the High Lords convene on Terra, they speak not of peace, but of containment. They know the truth. The Imperium cannot be controlled, only managed. Its borders burn constantly, its worlds rebel, its citizens starve by the trillions. Yet the illusion of unity must persist. The people must never see the cracks. They must believe the Emperor still guides them. And so, every time a truth threatens to surface a planetary governor's ambition, a priest's corruption, a military coup, or a whisper that the Emperor's light is fading, the order is given. Purge the record, cleanse the witness, restore faith through fear. Sometimes, that order passes to the Assassinorum, to the Vindicare snipers, the Eversa berserkers, the shadowy Culexus. But when the threat grows too large, when an entire world must be made to forget, when the stain must be burned out of the collective memory of mankind, the Inquisition turns to its most terrifying weapon, the Adeptus Astartes. Officially, the Space Marines answer to no one but the Emperor. In reality, the Inquisition knows how to speak in his name. They use ancient privileges granted during the Great Crusade, the Mandates of Terror, scrolls older than most chapters themselves. These decrees bear the imperial sigil, the double-headed Aquila, and the phrase, "By his will, you obey." For an Astartes commander, to refuse such an order is to defy the Emperor, and defiance is treason. Treason means annihilation. The Inquisitors understand this well. Some exploit it mercilessly. They choose their targets carefully, planets where rebellion grows, or where knowledge becomes too dangerous to tolerate. A forbidden archaeotech discovery, a relic from the dark age of technology, a text that questions the divinity of the Emperor. None of these can be allowed to exist. And so, the message is sent. Within days, thunderhawks descend through the clouds. Power armor gleams under the light of burning spires. The populace screams for salvation, but salvation has been redefined. The cleansing begins. What follows is not war, it is procedure. Each step of the operation is recorded by the Tech Marines, catalogued as Standard Purification Protocol. Civilians are labeled as unsecured assets. Cities become zones of non-compliance. Casualties are classified as statistical loss. By the end, the population is gone, replaced with a single phrase, compliance achieved. The politics of such exterminations are complex, and they reach higher than any chapter master dares to look. There are rivalries between the High Lords, between the Ordos of the Inquisition, between the great noble houses that control the grain of 1,000 worlds. When one faction grows too bold, when one lord begins to dream of independence, a quiet war begins. Armies do not clash openly, they vanish. Fleets burn in silent orbits, their distress calls jam. A planet succumbs to plague, a fortress monastery fails to respond. Behind every euphemism lies the hand of the Inquisition, using the Astartes as scalpels to remove tumors from the imperial body. One of the darkest examples was the Phaedron Decree. Officially, it never existed, but the records remain, hidden among forbidden archives in the Librarius Obscura. The Phaedron system had prospered for centuries. Its people were devout, its tithes abundant. But when a local cardinal began preaching that the emperor was not divine, merely the greatest of mankind's sons, the ecclesiarchy panicked. The idea spread faster than fire. Pilgrims began to question, priests began to doubt. The word heresy was whispered, and within weeks, the Ordo Hereticus intervened. A single order was drafted. Silence Phaedra, the Ultramarine successor, chapter, the Azure Blades, received the command. Their chaplains protested. Their librarian argued that such slaughter would sow doubt, not end it. The Inquisitor's reply was simple. Doubt dies with the doubters. 3 months later, Phaedra was gone, not corrupted, not conquered, but erased. Its orbit now holds a ring of shattered debris, its name struck from every star map. The Azure Blades were later declared missing in action. Their homeworld never heard from them again. That is the nature of the politics of silence. Those who carry out the Emperor's will often share the fate of those they destroy. When an Astartes force is used to purge a loyal population, it cannot be allowed to speak afterward. Witnesses are a liability, even divine ones. Some chapters are simply retired. Others are sent on crusades of redemption that never return. Their names fade. Their banners are folded and burned. And within the halls of the Administratum, their records are quietly sealed beneath a line of ink, legion unaccounted. But why do they obey? Why does a space marine, a being bred for war and pride, submit so completely to the will of mortal men? The answer lies in their very creation. The gene seed that builds them carries more than strength, it carries programming, a spiritual instinct for hierarchy, obedience, and faith. From their earliest days as neophytes, they are taught that questioning orders is not merely disobedience, but blasphemy. Their chaplains break them, then rebuild them in the Emperor's image, unquestioning, unyielding, unstoppable. When an Inquisitor stands before them bearing the Aquila, the Marine does not see a man, he sees the voice of God. This blind obedience is the glue that holds the Imperium together, but it is also its greatest weapon of suppression. Through it, politics becomes faith, and murder becomes ritual. A High Lord can erase rivals not by armies, but by sanctified genocide. An Inquisitor can burn a world and call it salvation, and the people will thank him for it. Every purge, every cleansing, every silence reinforces the illusion that the Imperium is infallible. In truth, it survives not because of its divinity, but because of its ability to erase its own sins faster than anyone can remember them. There are whispers of those within the Inquisition who regret this, who know what these silent wars have cost. The Ordo Sepulchrum, for instance, keeps records of psychic trauma among compliant populations. They know that each purge leaves a scar, a ripple of terror in the warp. Fear feeds chaos. Despair births demons. Yet the cycle continues, because the alternative truth is unthinkable. If humanity ever realized how often it has been slaughtered by its own protectors, the entire imperial creed would collapse in a single generation. The Inquisition understands this better than anyone. To them, silence is mercy. On Terra, within the vaulted chambers of the Senatorum Imperialis, such mercy is discussed in the language of strategy. A single sector lost to heresy might be acceptable if the others remain ignorant. 1,000,000 lives are expendable if the faith of 1,000,000,000 remains intact. The High Lords sit upon their thrones of adamantium and whisper phrases like acceptable loss and controlled revelation. They speak of loyalty, purity, and divine will, but their eyes are those of accountants. Every human soul is a number, every planet a ledger, and when the sums do not balance, the angels of death are summoned to correct the equation. Occasionally, a chapter master resists. He questions the morality of his orders or the legitimacy of the inquisitor delivering them. Such resistance rarely ends with debate. The Inquisition carries within it a fail-safe, the Edict of Compliance. Once declared, it authorizes any loyal chapter to eliminate another deemed contaminated by insubordination. It has been invoked only a handful of times. Each time, an entire brotherhood of Astartes vanished in a storm of fire. Officially, they were lost in the warp. Unofficially, they were erased by their kin. This is the politics of silence made manifest. Truth buried beneath loyalty, morality dissolved in obedience. There are even darker layers still. Some inquisitors do not act on orders at all. They act on belief. They see corruption not as a disease, but as destiny, something that must be continually purged lest it overtake creation itself. To such minds, burning worlds is not cruelty, but worship. They call themselves Puritans. Others, more cynical, call them butchers with badges. When these Puritans gain access to an Astartes strike force, the result is predictable: planetary annihilation disguised as salvation. And afterward, the same inquisitors write the histories that justify their acts. To question them is heresy. To expose them is suicide. But even among these monsters, there are exceptions, rare individuals who remember what the Emperor truly sought. One such name is whispered only in forbidden archives: Inquisitor Rael Thorn. Once of the Ordo Xenos, Thorn uncovered evidence of coordinated purges, ordered not to contain heresy, but to eliminate political rivals of the High Lords themselves. He sought to expose it. He contacted 3 chapters for testimony. 2 never replied. The third, the Iron Talons, vanished within a month, their fortress monastery found in ruins. Rael Thorn's ship later exploded in orbit above Terra. The cause? Reactor malfunction. His data caches were erased, his name struck from the rolls. But in the black markets of Necromunda, a single data fragment still circulates, a recording of his final words. The Emperor does not demand silence, only the guilty do. That is the paradox of the Imperium. It claims to fight for truth while being built entirely upon lies. Every bureaucrat, every priest, every soldier participates in the grand deceit. The Astartes are no different. They are simply the sharpest edge of the blade. When they hunt humanity, it is not because they hate mankind. It is because they love order more. They believe that obedience is salvation, that silence is peace, and so they continue, killing with the same devotion with which others pray. Somewhere in the void, aboard a battle barge drifting between wars, a captain kneels before the hololithic projection of an inquisitor. His armor is scarred, his hands still red from the blood of a recently cleansed city. The inquisitor's voice echoes through the vox. "Your service has restored faith, Captain. The Emperor is pleased." The captain does not reply. His eyes flicker to the side, to the faces of his men expressionless behind their helmets. He knows none of them will speak of this. They will fight again tomorrow, and the next day, until their sins become just another layer of oil and ash on their armor. He salutes, and the transmission ends. Outside the viewport, a dying world spins below, its cities reduced to embers. In the dark reflection of his visor, the captain sees not victory, but absence. A silence so deep, it feels holy. Because in the Imperium of man, silence is not the absence of sound, it is the sound of obedience. It is the anthem of survival. And for those who enforce it, the angels of death, it is the only truth they are ever allowed to know. War makes monsters of all men, but when monsters turn their blades on one another, something far darker is born. In the Imperium of man, the angels of death were created to defend humanity from every horror that the galaxy could conjure yet again and again. They are commanded to aim their guns at their own kind, and sometimes, even at each other. The chronicles of the Adeptus Astartes are filled with victories so radiant that the Imperium turns them into myth. But in the margins of those same records, smudged out by censors and erased by decree, lie the campaigns that must never be remembered operations in which loyal chapters butchered loyal soldiers and loyal brothers drew blood from one another beneath banners that both bore the Emperor's sigil. It begins, as it always does, with doubt. A world hesitates to pay its tithes. An Astra Militarum regiment questions a command. A chapter's purity is called into suspicion. And from that seed of uncertainty, the Inquisition cultivates catastrophe. One order, one seal, one whispered. Accusation and faith becomes justification for massacre. In the 38th millennium, the Ophidian Purge set the tone for all that followed. The desert world of Ophidia IV had been a fortress for centuries, defended by the 47th Cadian shock troops and a small detachment of the Black Templars. When an inquisitor of the Ordo Hereticus claimed that the local commissariat was harboring psychers without registration, she demanded immediate compliance with the Lex Imperialis. The Cadian commander delayed, pleading for verification. To the inquisitor, hesitation was treason. The next sunrise brought fire. The Templars opened up with orbital bombardment, erasing 20,000 guardsmen in a single barrage. Survivors who crawled from the craters described black-armored knights descending from the smoke, reciting litanies as they executed the wounded. When the purge ended, the Inquisitor's ship departed in silence. Her final report read, "Corruption contained, faith reaffirmed." The Cadian High Command never learned what the supposed heresy had been. It was never found because it never existed. But the message spread across the regiments of Segmentum Solar. Even loyalty can be mistaken for guilt. The Templars fought chaos with the same zeal they turned upon humanity, and for the Imperium, that was enough. Friendly fire is an ugly phrase in a galaxy that worships war. The Administratum prefers fraternal correction. It sounds cleaner, more divine. But the truth is less poetic. Sometimes, the Astartes are not called to purge heretics or mutants. Sometimes, they are sent to discipline allies whose faith has faltered. A regiment that refuses to charge. A governor who questions tithes. A Mechanicus Magos who withholds technology. All can be targets. And when the angels arrive, none dare resist. The Battle of Tessara Prime was one such correction. The planet's manufactorums had slowed output during a resource famine. The local governor, a devout servant of the ecclesiarchy, begged for time. Instead, the Raven Guard came. Their thunderhawks descended under cover of night, silent as knives. By dawn, the manufactorums were aflame. Workers fled into the wastes. Officially, the act was blamed on a chaos incursion. But witnesses saw no daemons, only black wings against a burning sky. When questioned, the chapter master of the Raven Guard responded with a single sentence recorded in the Administratum's archives. The Emperor's work must never cease, no matter how much blood it costs to oil the machine. The phrase became doctrine in certain sectors. The Imperium called it discipline. To those who survived, it was butchery wrapped in faith. But not all friendly fire comes from command. Sometimes, the Astartes themselves ignite it. The history of the Space Marines is one of pride barely restrained by duty, and when pride meets politics, brotherhood shatters. The chapters are divided by gene line, by creed, by interpretation of the Emperor's will. For every codex adherent, there is a zealot who calls him weak. For every ascetic, a crusader who calls him faithless. The Inquisition knows this, and it uses that division as a weapon sharper than any blade. During the Dalthus incident, 2 chapters, the Iron Serpents and the Blades of Sol, were deployed to cleanse a world infected by warp taint. Both were loyalist descendants of the Imperial Fists, both sworn to the Codex Astartes. Yet within days, the Serpents accused the Blades of corruption, claiming their librarians had been touched by the warp. Vox records recovered centuries later revealed the truth. An inquisitor had sent contradictory orders to each fleet, instructing both to treat the other as compromised. The result was inevitable. They met in orbit above Dalthus Secundus, both proclaiming loyalty, both convinced the other was damned. The battle lasted 3 days. When it ended, 2 chapters were gone. The planet below became a graveyard of drifting wrecks. The Inquisition filed the incident as warp communication failure. What those reports never mention is the aftermath. When the survivors were later found by Imperial salvage crews, their gene seed was unusable, corrupted by radiation, melted by plasma fire. The apothecary's vaults were full of ash. It was as if the galaxy itself wanted their memory erased. For the Astartes who commit such acts, there is no absolution. They are taught that loyalty is purity and doubt is heresy, but the mind is not so easily silenced. Some veterans begin to see faces in the dark, the faces of the men they killed, the soldiers who once fought beside them. They dream of battlefields without enemies, only brothers. The chaplains call it weakness of faith. The apothecaries call it genetic instability. The Inquisition calls it containment priority. Those who cannot recover are quietly reassigned to suicide missions or placed aboard derelict hulks destined for the warp. Better to vanish than to remember. The tragedy is that none of it is new. The roots of friendly fire stretch back to the heresy itself, when brother truly killed brother across the stars. Though the Horus heresy is spoken of as ancient myth, its echoes still haunt every bolter round fired today. The Imperium learned the wrong lesson from that war. It did not learn unity, it learned control. It discovered that loyalty is most reliable when built on fear. And so, every time two chapters clash, the High Lords nod in satisfaction. For as long as they fight each other, they will never rise against terror. The most infamous of these controlled purges occurred during the Oryx campaign. Officially, it was a crusade against a massive orc, War. But deep within the records of the Adeptus Terra, there lies an unredacted account from a Medicae officer of the White Scars. According to his testimony, the orcs had already been destroyed when new orders came from the Ordo Malleus. Eliminate all contaminated assets. The contamination, he discovered, referred not to the enemy, but to the human auxiliaries who had fought alongside the Astartes. They had seen something they should not, a manifestation of warp energy unleashed by a librarian. The order demanded silence, total and immediate. The White Scars refused. The Iron Hands did not. By the campaign's end, the auxiliaries were dead, and so were half the White Scars. Both chapters left the system broken, neither speaking of what had occurred. To this day, the Ordo Malleus lists the operation as inconclusive. Even within a single chapter, friendly fire festers in subtler forms, purges of thought, of conscience, of identity. Battle brothers denounce each other for hesitation. Sergeants execute subordinates whose zeal falters. In some chapters, this self-cleansing becomes tradition. The flesh-tearers, for example, conduct ritual trials in which warriors fight to the death to prove devotion. The Black Templars hunt internal heresy with the same fervor they hunt demons. The Blood Angels, haunted by the Black Rage, execute their own kin before madness claims them. In each case, loyalty consumes itself. The Imperium praises it as purity. For outsiders, it is impossible to tell where duty ends and murder begins. On the mining world of Harax, an entire detachment of the Imperial Guard was annihilated by the Salamanders during a retreat from a Tyrannid hive. The guardsmen had broken ranks, desperate to escape. The Salamanders saw cowardice, not survival. When the battle was over, the Xenos were dead, but so were 10,000 men of the Imperium. Their commander, Captain Velcor, recorded the event in his log. The flame of discipline purifies all weakness. To this day, the Salamanders are revered as paragons of mercy. No one remembers Harax. And perhaps that is the point. Memory is the first casualty of friendly fire. The Imperium cannot allow its citizens to know that their protectors are as dangerous as their enemies. So the Administratum rewrites, the Ecclesiarchy reinterprets, the Inquisition deletes. Each massacre becomes a miracle, each atrocity a victory. History is not written by the victors, it is written by the survivors who are forbidden to speak. But the Astartes remember, even when they pretend not to. They feel it in the rituals of purification, in the endless scrubbing of blood from ceramite. They hear it in the hymns that echo through their chapels, hymns that sound more like confessions than praise. Some try to drown it out with battle. Others seek penance through crusades that never end. And a few, the rarest of all, begin to question. There is an unconfirmed story of a captain of the Crimson Fists who once refused an order to fire upon Imperial civilians accused of harboring rebels. He argued that loyalty could not be maintained through fear. The Inquisitor overseeing the operation executed him on the spot. The rest of the company opened fire on the crowd moments later. Later, that same Inquisitor was found dead, his ship destroyed by an engine malfunction. Officially, the Crimson Fists deny involvement. Unofficially, the chapter still recites the captain's final words before every campaign. We were meant to protect, not to erase. Such defiance is rare because it is fatal. The Astartes who hesitate are labeled tainted, their gene seed quarantined, their banners burned. Yet even the Imperium cannot extinguish the idea that somewhere beneath the armor, humanity still breathes. It is this faint ember that terrifies the Inquisition most, because a space marine who remembers mercy is far more dangerous than any heretic. Across the galaxy, in the endless night between stars, fleets drift with sealed holds and silent vox. Their crews whisper of campaigns that never appear in official records. They speak of chapters called to fight rogue elements, only to find themselves facing mirror images in the fog of warmen in the same armor, chanting the same prayers, firing the same blessed ammunition. When the smoke clears, no one is left to tell which side was pure. Only the Emperor's name remains, echoing over the corpses of his sons. The truth is that friendly fire is not an accident in the Imperium, it is design. It is the mechanism by which loyalty is tested, by which obedience is proven, by which the population is reminded that faith has a cost. The Imperium thrives on controlled destruction. To burn one world is to keep 100 obedient. To erase one chapter is to keep 1,000 silent. And so, brother kills brother, not because they wish to, but because the system demands it. In the final moments before battle, as two fleets of Astartes close upon one another, their vox channels fill with prayers, not insults. They ask the same blessing. They invoke the same emperor. Each side believes itself righteous, and perhaps both are. When the first salvo fires, when torpedoes bloom like stars, there is no hatred, only duty. The void fills with debris, and the prayers continue until the signals fade into static. Somewhere in the depths of space, an Inquisitor watches from afar, hands folded, eyes cold. Another heresy extinguished, another truth buried, another silence achieved. And thus the Imperium endures not through unity, but through perpetual fratricide, sanctified by bureaucracy. The angels of death were meant to be humanity's sword. Now they are its executioners, its enforcers, its instruments of forgetting. They no longer ask why, only who, only when. Because in the grim darkness of the far future, friendly fire is not a mistake. It is policy. It is the sound of faith eating itself. It is the echo of brothers dying with the same prayer on their lips. For the Emperor. They call them holy killings, executions done in the name of purity, planned in the silence between prayers. Across the Imperium of man, entire governments vanish overnight, their leaders erased so cleanly that even memory trembles to recall them. The official communiques always say the same thing: natural causes, unfortunate warp incident, administrative restructuring. But those who serve close to power know the truth. When politics fail, the angels of death are sent to clean the slate. No man should ever see a space marine at court. The presence of an Astartes among nobles means the decision has already been made, and it will end in blood. The Inquisition calls these interventions discreet corrections. To the victims, they are divine judgment. To the Marines themselves, they are simply orders: another mission, another target, another silence to enforce. The assassinations begin where ambition dares to rise above obedience. A planetary governor refuses to obey an impossible tithe. A cardinal speaks heresy in private, claiming that the emperor is not a god but a man. A general of the Astra Militarum becomes beloved by his soldiers, his name whispered with more reverence than that of terror. Each one represents a potential fracture in the illusion of unity. Each one must be removed before the rumor becomes faith. The process is methodical. It begins with whispers from the Ordos Hereticus, Malleus, Xenos, each claiming jurisdiction. Evidence is fabricated, confessions extracted, witnesses prepared. The decision is then delivered to a chapter master under seal, bearing the sigil of the Aquila. No explanation is given, only coordinates, and the phrase, "Purity requires discretion." Within hours, a strike cruiser departs. Its course will never appear in the logs. Its purpose will never be written. On the moon palace of Belisar Prime, the ritual played out as it always does. The planetary governor, Lucien Varon, had been too successful. Under his command, Belisar's forges had increased production tenfold, and his people had begun to see him not as servant, but savior. A statue was raised in his honor, a man of flesh beside the Emperor of Gold. The ecclesiarchy protested, the Inquisition investigated, and one night, the sky fell. Witnesses remember thunder without lightning, shadows moving against the stars. By dawn, the palace was gone. No explosion, no debris, just absence. Weeks later, a new governor was appointed. The records of Lucien Varan were sealed under Decree Obscura 449C. The sigil on the document was that of the imperial fists. No one ever asked them why. Not every assassination is so clean. Some require theatre, a public miracle to disguise a political cull. During the Lumen Conclave Purge, a council of 9 cardinals met on a pilgrimage world to debate doctrinal reform. Halfway through the convocation, the planet suffered what the Administratum later called a meteoric anomaly. A single object fell from orbit, obliterating the Basilica Lux Eterna. The blast radius was precise, 300 meters, no more. Later forensic analysis, hidden deep in Mechanicus archives, identified the signature of an orbital lance strike. The ship responsible bore no known heraldry, its transponder erased. Survivors spoke of falling angels clad in white and gold, their voices calm as they executed wounded clerics. In the aftermath, the surviving cardinals proclaimed a miracle, a sign that the emperor himself had corrected their blasphemy. The ecclesiarchy rejoiced. The Inquisition closed the file. Among the Astartes, these missions are known by a darker name, the Black Oaths. Each oath is sworn in private, sealed by the chaplain's hand, and erased from the chapter's records once fulfilled. To break one is unthinkable. To question one is heresy. The Black Oaths are the Emperor's other scripture, the verses of blood that maintain the empire of lies. For the warriors who carry them out, there is no glory. No battle honors are awarded for the silent kill. A sergeant of the Night Lords once described the feeling before his execution squad stormed the mansion of a rogue noble house on Hydrax 7. We are not heroes tonight. We are erasers. When the operation ended, 47 nobles lay dead, their corpses arranged in the shape of the Aquila. Their estates were looted not by thieves but by the Adeptus Arbites, who declared the wealth confiscated for imperial restoration. The noble line of Hydrax ceased to exist. The assassins vanished into the void. The Inquisition's reliance on such holy murders has grown with every century. Fear is faster than faith. A single assassination ripples through entire sectors, reminding all who rule that their power is borrowed, temporary, conditional. A governor who hears of his colleague's sudden warp sickness will sign any decree placed before him. A preacher who dreams of reform will remember the silence that followed the Lumen Conclave. The Imperium governs through examples carved in blood. There are, however, lines even the Inquisition dares not cross, or so they claim. To deploy a full company of Space Marines for political work risks exposure. Instead, select veterans are detached from their chapters under ancient agreements known as shadow bindings. Once sworn, these Marines serve directly under inquisitorial command, their identities erased, their heraldry stripped. They wear plain black armor, adorned only with the sigil of the Imperium. They have no name, no rank, no homeworld. When they speak, their voices are filtered through vox distortion, as if the Emperor himself wishes to remain anonymous. These are the silent hands. They appear without warning and depart without trace. An entire parliament may die before dawn, each member felled by a single bolt round to the heart, each death recorded as cardiac failure. Servitors clean the blood before sunrise. Scribes rewrite the minutes. The populace wakes to find new laws already decreed. The system grinds on, unaware that its rulers were replaced in the night. The silent hands report only to their handler, an inquisitor of the Ordo Sepulchris, the order tasked with ensuring that the dead stay forgotten. Their operations have no number, no code name, only dates. But one entry, the 73rd Silence, has escaped deletion. It describes the termination of an entire planetary senate accused of economic heresy, specifically refusing to double grain exports during famine. When questioned, the presiding inquisitor wrote only, Mercy is inefficiency. For those few Astartes who survive long enough to see the pattern, realization comes too late. They begin to notice that their missions no longer involve the alien or the mutant. Their targets are always human. Their victories are always censored. The banners of the fallen are always burned. They start to wonder if the emperor they serve still recognizes them. In some, doubt curdles into rage. In others, it becomes a silent resignation, a ritual numbness that replaces conscience. There are whispers of kill teams who turned on their masters. The most infamous is the Red Sanction incident. A detachment of ultramarine successors was ordered to eliminate a seditious conclave on the agri-world of Varian. Upon arrival, they discovered that the conclave consisted of unarmed civilians petitioning for aid. Their commander refused to fire. When the Inquisitor repeated the order, the Marines turned their bolters on her instead. 3 days later, the entire detachment was declared excommunicate traitoris. Their fortress monastery was bombarded from orbit by their own parent chapter. No one speaks of Varian now. Its soil is still black. The paradox deepens. Each murder committed to preserve order feeds the very corruption it seeks to erase. Every secret execution spawns a new heresy in the hearts of those who witness the lie. Fear breeds disbelief. Disbelief breeds rebellion. Rebellion demands more purges. The Imperium is a serpent devouring its tail, sustained by blood, addicted to its own silence. And yet, within the labyrinth of power, some whisper that this cycle is necessary, that the galaxy's horrors leave no room for mercy. To govern 1 trillion souls, one must occasionally erase 1 million. To protect faith, one must sacrifice truth. These are the axioms carved into the stone of the Senatorum Imperialis. They have forgotten that the Emperor once sought enlightenment, not suppression. They worship the corpse of his ideal while strangling everything that resembles it. The result is a civilization in which murder has become liturgy. A kill team recites litanies before pulling the trigger. An inquisitor blesses his data slate before issuing the death warrant. A cardinal prays for forgiveness before signing an edict that will burn his rival's cathedral. Every act of political violence is baptized in ritual, transforming assassination into sanctity. The Imperium has mastered the art of sin without guilt. There are moments, fleeting and fragile, when the facade cracks. A veteran Marine returns from a silent mission and refuses to take communion. He speaks only once. "We killed believers." His chaplain nods and replies, "Then you killed rightly, for belief must never threaten obedience." The Marine says nothing more. That night, he walks into the desert outside the fortress and never returns. His name is stricken from the rolls. The chapter's records mark him as missing in action presumed faithful. In the depths of the Inquisition's data vaults lies a phrase repeated across thousands of reports: faith restored through elimination. It appears after every purge, every black op, every erasure. But those who read the older files know the phrase once read differently. During the Great Crusade, the original dictum was, faith restored through understanding. Somewhere across 10,000 years, the Imperium replaced wisdom with murder. Now, political assassination is the Empire's nervous system. Remove one heretic, and the message travels instantly: obey or vanish. 100 new zealots rise to take his place, terrified but loyal. The machine keeps moving, the stars keep burning. And beneath it all, the angels of death wait in silence for the next set of coordinates. Because in the Imperium of man, even death must serve bureaucracy. The assassins are saints, the victims are offerings, and every bullet that ends a life is a prayer whispered into the void. For the Emperor, who demands silence above all things. They call them the Silent Wars because no one is meant to know they ever happened. No banners were raised, no declarations signed, no hymns sung. Fleets launched without fanfare, entire systems cut from the astropathic network, and when the silence lifted, the stars themselves seemed rearranged. The Imperium endures because it forgets, and forgetting is the only victory these wars ever produce. The first began in the shadows of Segmentum Pacificus. 2 chapters, both loyal, both pure, answered conflicting orders from the Ordo Malleus. Each was told that the other had fallen to corruption. They met above the hive world Krith, exchanging vox blessings before opening fire. Hours later, the planet below was a cinder. The High Lords never confirmed who started the shooting, only that contamination was contained. From that day onward, the Administratum began scrubbing planetary registries the moment a crusade went silent. Oblivion became protocol. No one outside the Inquisition knows how many of these phantom wars have scarred the void. Some last a night, others stretch for decades behind curtains of misinformation. They erupt when a governor's loyalty wavers, when two inquisitors dispute jurisdiction, when a Mechanicus forge refuses to share its designs. Each faction invokes the Emperor's name, and each believes itself righteous. By the time the truth surfaces, there is no one left to remember it. On the world, Ephron Tertius, for example, the silent war took the form of bureaucratic madness. The Death Spectres were ordered to defend the planet from Xenos incursion. Simultaneously, the Minotaurs received a sealed writ labeling the system irreparably tainted. The Spectres dug in. The Minotaurs arrived to cleanse. For 3 months they fought, orbital strikes turning oceans to steam. When the astropaths of neighboring systems tried to warn Terra, their messages were blocked by warp interference. Centuries later, Ephron's orbit remains littered with sarcophagi of iron. 2 chapters, reduced to ghosts, circling a dead world. The Imperium learned to weaponize these silences. They became convenient storms that swallowed evidence. When a High Lord wished to erase a scandal, he provoked a clash between loyal forces, each convinced the other served heresy. The destruction buried the truth beneath ruins and martyrdom. The Administratum reclassified the theatre as lost to the warp, faith healed the rest. To the Astartes, the silent wars are not history but inheritance. Every new chapter carries whispers of the lost. Brothers who vanished without trace, names struck from the codex, honor rolls ending midline. They train, knowing they might be next. Recruits ask what became of the 2nd and 11th legions, and their mentors answer only, they were found wanting. The lesson is clear: obedience buys survival, not truth. Within the fortress monasteries, librarians sometimes sense echoes of battles never recorded, psychic aftershocks rippling through the warp like the grief of forgotten gods. In their dreams, they hear the same refrain, bolt of fire without end, prayers distorted by static. They awake with the taste of ash and the memory of worlds that never existed. The chaplains call it temptation, a test of faith, but deep down they know. Ghosts of the silent wars scream louder than the living. Some of these purges are not even military. They are cultural annihilations disguised as heresy suppression. Whole hive clusters erased because their artisans sculpted the Emperor's image too human. Scholar, orders purged for comparing saintly miracles with pre-imperial technologies. Each cleansing conducted in darkness, every record sealed by the same phrase, faith maintained. The result is a civilization that remembers only victories and miracles, never the prices paid. Occasionally, fragments escape deletion. A damaged servitor recovered from a derelict ship muttering battle logs. A cracked data slate found in a monastery wall. They tell of engagements between banners that should have fought side by side. Of kill teams dropped into cities whose only sin was knowing too much. Of Astartes sobbing in static-filled Vox channels, asking why their brothers wore the same armor. Those fragments never reach the public. The Inquisition's data sensors melt them down to slag, yet somehow, copies always survive, like infections the body cannot purge. For the rare few who have pieced these remnants together, the silent wars reveal the Imperium's deepest fear, that it cannot distinguish loyalty from rebellion. Its mechanisms of control are so absolute that even truth sounds like treason. Better to burn the uncertain than risk the impure. Better to drown the galaxy in sanctioned blood than to admit ignorance. In the halls of the Inquisition, there are priests who bless these decisions with trembling hands. They argue that the Emperor's plan is incomprehensible, that the angels' wars against one another are part of a cosmic purification. They call it the refinement of faith. Each silent purge, they claim, removes doubt from the collective soul of mankind. They cannot see that they are merely trimming the same wound again and again until nothing human remains. There are stories, too, of those who resisted the silence. The Celestial Lions once questioned an Inquisitor's massacre. Their reward was extinction. The Firehawks disobeyed a purge order and vanished into the warp. The Lamenters tried to save civilians and were cursed with endless misfortune. Every act of compassion is punished until pity itself becomes heresy. The lesson spreads faster than any edict. Obedience is survival, empathy is death. And yet the silent wars continue, because they serve a purpose larger than politics. They are the Imperium's way of pruning reality. Each erased world tightens the myth of perfection. Each vanished chapter strengthens the illusion that the Emperor's design is flawless. The galaxy becomes tidier, smaller, easier to believe in. The cost is merely truth. Somewhere on the edge of the segmentum obscurus drifts a derelict battle barge, known only as the Obedient Silence. Its vox channels hum with voices that do not exist, fragments of orders looping endlessly. By his will, proceed. By his will, cleanse. By his will. No one knows which chapter it belonged to. Its hull bears no markings, only scorch patterns shaped like wings. Explorator fleets avoid it. Augurs report the ship weeping across the warp. Perhaps it is a tomb, perhaps a reminder. In either case, it is the perfect monument to a civilization that worships the sound of its own erasures. The Imperium teaches that silence is proof of peace, but listen closely to the void, and you will hear what peace truly sounds like. The echo of brothers who were never meant to exist, the static of prayers rewritten, the quiet applause of bureaucrats as another truth is buried under the dust of 1,000 dead suns. For in the grim darkness of the far future, war does not end when the guns fall silent. It ends when there is no one left alive to remember who fired first. There is a saying among the chaplains of the Adeptus Astartes: doubt is the first corruption. In that one sentence lies the entire secret of the Imperium's survival and its damnation. For 10,000 years, obedience has been mistaken for faith, and silence for virtue. The Space Marines are not born knowing right from wrong. They are engineered to believe that right is whatever the Emperor's servants command, and wrong is whatever the Emperor's servants condemn. Everything else is noise. To understand how a Space Marine can slaughter the innocent and call it holy work, you must understand how obedience is sculpted into his very bone. From the moment a neophyte is chosen, his humanity begins to dissolve. His name is erased, his family forgotten, his memories rewritten. The organs that make him superhuman also make him less human. The catalepsian node teaches him to ignore exhaustion. The liman's ear deafens him to fear. The progenoid glands turn his body into property of his chapter. Even his dreams are monitored by chaplains who whisper doctrine while he sleeps. By the time he earns his armor, there is nothing left of the man who once asked why. Only a weapon remains a being who finds purpose, not in reason, but in command. Every ritual of the Astartes reinforces this conditioning. Before battle, they kneel in perfect rows, while chaplains pace before them, chanting litanies carved from 10,000 years of propaganda. Obedience is purity, doubt is decay. To question is to invite chaos. The words are repeated until they become reflex. When the order to kill comes, there is no hesitation, because hesitation was excised during training, burned out of the mind like a disease. And yet, beneath the layers of ceramite and prayer, some small part of the original man still flickers. Sometimes, in the silence after battle, when the bolter smoke clears and the hymns fade, a Marine will look at what he has done and feel something almost forgotten guilt. It is brief, buried quickly beneath recitations of faith, but it is real. Those who cannot suppress it are sent to the chaplains for spiritual renewal. Few return unchanged. The chaplains call it confession. The apothecaries call it recalibration. But what it truly is lobotomy of the soul. Neural stimulants flood the brain. The subject is forced to relive battle chants while his heart rate is synchronized to the pulse of sacred drums. Pain becomes penance. Pain becomes obedience. When the ritual ends, the Marine emerges renewed. The memory of doubt replaced with a chemical euphoria labeled divine purpose. This conditioning is not cruelty for cruelty's sake. It is design. The Imperium cannot function if its protectors think. Thought breeds choice, and choice breeds rebellion. The gene seed itself has been altered over millennia to enhance compliance. The Susan membrane allows a Marine to sleep through centuries, but it also teaches him to wait to obey orders, even in death. The Betcher's gland allows him to spit acid, but symbolically, it reminds him that even his saliva is weaponized. Every organ serves the same purpose: to erase individuality and replace it with function. Astartes are told that Obedience is freedom. In a way, they believe it. To surrender one's will is to be free from guilt. To be told who to kill is to be free from deciding who deserves death. They envy humanity's chaos, even as they despise it. In their darkest hours, some whisper that they fight not to protect mankind, but to destroy the part of themselves that still remembers being human. Occasionally, the conditioning fails. Librarians sense at first faint psychic murmurs of doubt spreading through the company like static. A Marine hesitates before executing a civilian. Another forgets a prayer. A third begins to question why they cleanse worlds that show no sign of corruption. Such behavior is labeled contagion of thought. Entire squads are isolated, their minds probed for traces of heresy. Those found compromised are executed and recorded as casualties of battle. Those found salvageable are subjected to the litany of iron, a procedure in which sacred words are branded into their flesh with heated adamantium rods, while the chaplain recites the emperor's 10,000 names. When the ritual is complete, the subjects can no longer distinguish pain from reverence. Some chapters take the process further. The Black Templars view questioning as proof of weakness. The Iron Hands replace their failing organs with augmetics, believing emotion to be impurity. The Word-bearers, before their fall, redefined obedience as worship, turning faith itself into an addiction. Even the Ultramarines, paragons of discipline, indoctrinate their initiates with the Codex Astartes until its pages become scripture. Every law, every gesture, every breath regulated. In their pursuit of perfection, they have built prisons inside their own minds and called them temples. There are whispers of chapters that broke free not in rebellion, but in realization. The most tragic among them was the Obsidian Claw. They fought beside the Inquisition for centuries, until a librarian uncovered records of purges they themselves had carried out, colonies erased, millions slain in error. The chapter gathered in council, debated for 7 days, and then made a collective vow. They would never again raise a weapon against humanity. The Inquisition responded within a week. Orbital bombardment. Exterminatus. Nothing left but molten glass and silence. Their epitaph was written by their killers. The Obsidian Claw proved unfit to bear the Emperor's will. Such stories spread among the Astartes like forbidden hymns. Not officially, never allowed, but in the quiet moments of maintenance, when helmets are removed and only the sound of breathing fills the chamber, someone will whisper, "Do you ever wonder if he still sees us?" The answer is always the same. We see for him. It is both creed and curse. Psychologically, obedience gives the Astartes stability in a universe where sanity itself is a luxury. The warp howls, chaos tempts, reality fractures. To think independently in such an environment is to risk madness. Orders become anchors, routine becomes armor. In killing the disobedient, they reassure themselves that their own faith is intact. Every purge is self-therapy, the destruction of the mirror that might show them what they've become. The Inquisition understands this dynamic intimately. It cultivates it. A Marine racked with guilt is unpredictable. A Marine certain of righteousness is controllable. Thus, missions are framed as tests of devotion. Even the extermination of entire human populations is presented as moral cleansing. Chaplains preach that the Emperor's love is measured in blood, that every corpse sanctifies the soil. The more they kill, the holier they feel. It is Pavlovian faith, a reward loop of slaughter and prayer. But sometimes, in rare moments of lucidity, cracks form. The Marine begins to ask questions in secret. He wonders whether the Emperor truly demanded this, or whether mortal men have hijacked his silence to justify their own ambitions. These doubts are recorded in the Book of Remorse, a tome each chaplain carries but never shows. It contains confessions collected before execution, written in the dying words of those who faltered. One line appears again and again, scrawled in blood or ash, "I obeyed too well." The tragedy of the Adeptus Astartes is that their obedience was meant to be noble. During the Great Crusade, it bound them to a vision of unity. But 10 millennia of decay have turned it into a cage. They are still loyal, but loyalty to what? The Emperor's dream died with his body. What remains is bureaucracy draped in faith. The Space Marine no longer protects humanity. He protects the idea of obedience itself. He fights not for victory, but for consistency. As long as the machine turns, He believes the Emperor still watches. In psychological terms, this is the ultimate defense mechanism. Denial sanctified. The Astartes cannot accept the Emperor's death, so they kill to keep his illusion alive. Every purge, every silence, every brother executed in his name is an act of worship, a desperate attempt to make the corpse on the Golden Throne smile. Somewhere on a dying world, a lone marine kneels amid the ruins of a city his chapter was ordered to cleanse. The air stinks of promethium. Corpses smolder in the streets. He removes his helmet, feels the heat of fire on his skin, and whispers a prayer that is not in the litany. Father, if this is your will, forgive me. If it is not, forgive them. No vox records his words. No scribe will write them down. By morning, he will bury the thought beneath discipline, just as the Imperium buries every uncomfortable truth. And so the cycle endures. The obedient remain pure. The doubters vanish. The machine continues. The Emperor stays silent. Because in the Imperium of man, obedience is not loyalty. It is anesthesia, the blessed numbness that lets gods and monsters sleep side by side while the galaxy burns around them. The Imperium of man does not bury its dead. It buries its history. There are no funerals for the fallen chapters. No monuments for the erased. Only silence. The same silence that the High Lords wield like a weapon. To be forgotten in the Imperium is worse than death. It is the annihilation of memory itself. Across 10,000 years, entire legions of the Adeptus Astartes have vanished, their banners struck from the records, their names scraped from the marble of the Hall of Heroes on Terra. In the codices, these absences are marked with hollow titles, expunged, lost in the warp, records unavailable due to sanctified secrecy. But the void between those lines tells a truer story, not of disappearance, but of deliberate erasure. The Imperium calls these vanished brotherhoods the Forgotten Sons. The Inquisition calls them necessary redactions. And the Space Marines themselves call them nothing at all. For to speak their names is to invite investigation. The oldest and most sacred of these deletions belong to the 2nd and 11th Legions, the Primarchs who were cast out even before the Horus Heresy. Officially, their records were lost. Unofficially, they were purged. Their names struck from the Imperial truth. Their statues removed from the Hall of the Primarchs. Their very existence rendered myth. Some whisper they defied the Emperor himself. Others say they learned truths so terrible that mercy demanded silence. The only certainty is that even their brothers were forbidden to remember them. When the remaining Primarchs gathered, 2 empty thrones stood among them, monuments not to defeat, but to censorship. Yet the practice did not end with the legions. The millennia after the heresy became a procession of disappearances. Each century, another chapter would fade from the rolls, its heraldry vanishing from the librarium archives, its homeworld reclassified as quarantine. The excuses changed: warp storms, genetic instability, Xeno's attack, but the pattern remained the same. Erasure as governance, forgetting as control. Among these, some stories still echo in whispers. The Requiem Purge, a minor chapter founded during the 20th founding, tasked with defending the frontier world of Belthra Secundus. When an Inquisitor declared the planet spiritually contaminated, the Requiem Marines refused to enact exterminatus, insisting the populace remained loyal. For 3 months they held the line, protecting civilians against the Inquisitor's hired regiments. Then the Minotaurs arrived, a chapter infamous for obedience beyond reason. The battle lasted 1 night. When dawn came, the Requiem were gone, their fortress shattered, their gene seed declared unfit for harvest. The Inquisitor's report read simply: correction applied, the Emperor's will restored, the Veiled Knights. A fleet-based chapter that vanished during the 37th millennium after intercepting a Mechanicus transmission labeled Omniscient Priority. Witnesses claimed the Knights discovered evidence of an ancient weapon buried on Mars, something pre-imperial, perhaps older than the Emperor himself. They refused to surrender the data, invoking their right of independent command. Within a month, every ship in their fleet was destroyed in simultaneous reactor failure. Mars never acknowledged the event. The Adeptus Mechanicus later issued a statement praising the Knights for their final act of loyalty. No remains were recovered. The Lamenters, perhaps the most tragic of all, cursed by fate and the politics of purity, they were loyal to the last. After the Badab War, The Imperium granted them a century-long penitent crusade for siding with the wrong lord. They obeyed, seeking redemption in endless war. They saved worlds, liberated colonies, defended the weak, and for that, they were punished. Every campaign ended in betrayal. Every ally turned. By the time their crusade was over, barely 100 lamenters remained. The Administratum quietly removed their name from active roles. Officially, they still exist. In truth, they are ghosts adrift between stars, fighting battles no one records, dying deaths no one mourns. The Firehawks, declared missing after entering the warp on a crusade, their fleet never returned. Centuries later, derelict ships bearing their insignia appeared in the maelstrom, aflame but functional. Survivors called themselves the Legion of the Damned. Whether they are revenants, warp echoes, or something worse, no one knows. The Imperium refuses to acknowledge the connection, for to do so would mean admitting that even the dead refuse to stay silent. The Celestial Lions, they made the fatal mistake of asking questions. During the Third War for Armageddon, the Lions openly accused an Inquisitor of orchestrating the deaths of civilians for political leverage. Their chaplain demanded an inquiry before the ecclesiarchy. Weeks later, the Lions' entire command structure was wiped out by random artillery fire. Reinforcements sent to support them were misdirected, their supplies lost, their communications jammed. By war's end, the chapter was functionally extinct. The surviving few were exiled to the Outer Rim. The Inquisition called it tragedy. The Astartes called it lesson. The Ashen Drakes, a successor of the Salamanders, they vanished during a campaign against renegade Imperial Guard units. Their last recorded transmission, "We have discovered who the enemy truly is." The message ended abruptly. The world they fought on, Lothar's Reach, was later consumed by orbital fire. The Adeptus Mechanicus declared it tectonically unstable, no remains recovered. And these are only the stories that escaped destruction. For every name whispered in secret, 100 more have been erased so thoroughly that not even their gene line can be traced. Entire foundings may have been nullified, every record deleted from the Apocrypha of Davio and the Index Astartes. It is said that the Inquisition keeps their relics locked in vaults beneath Terra, each sarcophagus labelled only with a number and a prayer of forgetfulness. For the Astartes who still exist, these disappearances serve as both warning and comfort. Warning, because disobedience ends not in death, but in oblivion. Comfort, because if they too must one day vanish, at least they will join brothers who understood the truth. To be erased is to be freed from the hypocrisy of eternity. In the fortress monasteries, chaplains tell new initiates that those who question the Emperor are consumed by chaos. But the veterans know better. They remember the empty banners, the songs that end mid-verse, the murals repainted so many times that the faces beneath have blurred into ghosts. They know that erasure is not punishment for heresy. It is the tool by which heresy is defined. Every time the High Lords remove a chapter from history, they strengthen the illusion that what remains is perfect. The Codex Astartes becomes scripture because the dissenters are gone. The Emperor becomes infallible because those who saw his flaws no longer exist. The galaxy grows simpler, smaller, easier to believe in. Truth is pruned like a garden until only obedience blooms. And still, fragments persist. A relic discovered on a dead moon, a pauldron engraved with symbols no lexicon can translate. A data crystal found aboard a derelict battle barge, playing a recording of a marine's final words. "We fought for him, not them." A forgotten tomb on a barren world, its sarcophagus adorned with a winged skull, and the words, "Remember us in silence." The Inquisition sends purging teams to destroy such evidence, but rumor spreads faster than fire. Across the stars, the faithful whisper of the erased legions, saints of rebellion who died for truth. The ecclesiarchy calls it heresy, the people call it hope. Perhaps one day, a chapter will refuse deletion. Perhaps they will record their own extinction and broadcast it across the galaxy before the flames consume them. Perhaps that message will reach Terra itself and make the golden corpse stir upon his throne. Or perhaps not. Perhaps the silence is endless, and the only immortality left to the Astartes is the memory no one dares to speak aloud. In the end, it changes nothing. The Imperium will continue to erase. The Inquisition will continue to cleanse. And the Space Marines will continue to fight, each of them secretly wondering when their own records will be lost to the warp. Because in the Imperium of Man, the greatest punishment is not death. It is to be forgotten by those who ordered you to live forever. In the end, there is no light in the Imperium, only reflection. The glow of sacred candles, the shimmer of molten fire, the metallic gleam of armor polished for eternity. The Space Marines, the angels of death, move through this radiance like walking relics, halos of gold, circling heads bowed in prayer. But light, in the Imperium, is never illumination, it is concealment. The halo blinds more than it reveals. For 10,000 years, the Imperium has survived by confusing divinity with obedience, faith with fear, silence with peace. The Astartes are its living symbols, the physical embodiment of this paradox. To the masses, they are saviors. To the Inquisition, they are tools. To themselves, they are both and neither. Each Marine carries the truth behind the halo inside his skull, buried beneath layers of indoctrination, ritual, and pain. That truth is simple. The Emperor never wanted gods. He wanted men who could think. And now the galaxy is ruled by creatures who cannot. The Emperor's great dream, a humanity united by reason, died the moment he was nailed to the Golden Throne. In his silence, others spoke for him. The ecclesiarchy called him a god. The administratum called him a necessity. The Inquisition called him justification. And the angels, bred for obedience, accepted all three. Their prayers became policy. Their wars became law. Their faith became the language of control. Now they fight endlessly, not because they believe, but because belief is all they have left. Each battle is another prayer to a God who does not answer. Each purge is another offering to a bureaucracy that cannot feel. They kill not for the Emperor's glory, but to fill the silence that his absence has left behind. The Imperium calls this devotion. In truth, it is addiction, the endless craving for orders, the desperate need to belong to something greater, even if that something no longer exists. There are moments, rare and terrible, when the illusion cracks. A Marine stands among the ashes of a world he has cleansed and realizes that no voice guided his hand, that the command came not from the heavens, but from a trembling scribe on terror. He looks to the sky and sees nothing but void. The realization is enough to break any man, but the Astartes cannot break. They were made to endure, even their own damnation. So he falls to his knees and prays louder, not out of faith, but to drown out the sound of truth whispering in his mind. That whisper, faint, insistent, poisonous, is what the Inquisition fears most. Because if even one angel of death stops believing, if one truly sees the Imperium for what it is, the illusion of sanctity would shatter. The people would see that their gods bleed, their saviors doubt, their protectors lie. The entire empire, built on the scaffolding of myth, would collapse into the same void it claims to fight. And so the silence is enforced. Every doubt is purged, every heresy erased, every question buried beneath the ashes of obedience. The Astartes become priests of absence, guardians of a throne whose occupant has become nothing but a machine of flesh and electricity. They preach with bolters, baptize with fire, and bless the faithful with annihilation. The halo remains. It gleams in every mural, every stained glass depiction of an angel descending from the heavens. But look closer, and you will see what the artist never meant to paint. The light bends outward, not inward. The halo is not illumination. It is containment, a cage of radiance trapping the soul inside, sealing away thought, so that only duty remains. Still, something human survives within that cage. The same spark that built empires and burned them down. It flickers in the eyes of a dying Marine who whispers the Emperor's name not as a prayer, but as a question. It echoes in the rare acts of mercy, a child spared, a village left unburned, a corpse buried instead of incinerated. Small rebellions, meaningless in scale, but monumental in defiance. Each one a tiny fracture in the armor of perfection. These cracks frighten the High Lords more than any alien invasion, because through them, truth leaks. Truth that the Imperium is not eternal. Truth that the Emperor is not watching. Truth that humanity was never meant to be ruled by fear. The Imperium cannot afford such truths, so it kills those who find them and worships those who never will. The Inquisition calls it necessary sacrifice. The Astartes call it the burden of purity. But every empire that survives by burning its own history must one day choke on the smoke. There is an unrecorded legend among the Astartes, a myth whispered only by those who have seen too much. It tells of a chapter that once returned from war to find its homeworld erased from every star chart. Its people gone, its cities flattened, its archives burned. The chapter master knelt before the ruins and understood the message. The Imperium no longer had use for them. They would be forgotten. So he gathered his brothers and spoke the last words ever attributed to him. If they will not remember us in light, they will remember us in fire. For 1 hour, the skies of a dozen systems burned as the chapter turned its weapons inward, destroying its own relics, ships, and history before the Inquisition could claim them. When the purge fleets arrived, nothing was left but a ring of ash. Their names were erased as planned, but the manner of their death became a ghost that haunts the warp. A message encoded in psychic screams, repeating endlessly. We obeyed. We saw. We chose silence no more. Perhaps it is only legend. Perhaps it is prophecy. Perhaps it is already happening again. Because the truth behind the halo is not holiness. It is horror. The horror of men who once sought enlightenment and became enforcers of darkness. They believe themselves immortal, but they are only echoes. They believe themselves righteous, but righteousness in the Imperium is measured by silence. And yet, even in that silence, there is meaning. The Astartes are not villains. They are victims of faith twisted into control, of purpose turned into slavery. They are what humanity becomes when it stops asking why. Somewhere in the void, aboard a battle barge drifting between forgotten wars, a lone marine stands before a mural of the Emperor. The image is cracked, the gold fading, the eyes empty. He removes his gauntlet, touches the glass, and for the first time feels the cold beneath the gilding. He whispers, "We still fight, Father, not for you, for the chance that one day you might wake." No one hears him, no one answers. But for an instant, he imagines the throne flickering not with divine light, but with the pale glow of something almost human. Hope, perhaps, or memory. The Imperium would call this blasphemy. The Inquisition would call it madness. The chaplains would call it weakness. But to that lone marine, it is truth raw, unguarded, unbearable. The truth behind the halo, that the light which crowns every saint of the Imperium is not the light of salvation, but the reflection of fire devouring the universe. And still he prays. Because what else is there left to do when silence itself has become sacred? He turns away, seals his helmet, and marches into the void. His footsteps echo through the empty corridors, rhythmic, relentless, like a heartbeat carved into eternity. One more angel of death, fulfilling the only command the Imperium has ever truly given. Keep fighting, never stop, never think, because in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war, and beneath every shining halo, only the shadow of obedience.